The cursor blinked on the black screen as Rachel Martinez stared at the command prompt. 3 years of loyalty, countless unpaid hours, and innovative solutions that saved the company millions, all reduced to a single line of code that would change everything. What started as a simple disagreement about overtime pay was about to become the most expensive lesson in employee relations that Pinnacle Financial Services would ever learn. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Rachel had always been the type of person who arrived early and stayed late, not because she had to, but because she genuinely loved solving complex problems. As a senior database administrator at Pinnacle Financial Services in downtown Phoenix, she managed the intricate web of servers that kept the company's operations running smoothly. Every transaction, every client record, every financial calculation flowed through the systems she had meticulously designed and maintained. The trouble began on a sweltering Tuesday morning in August when her manager, Derek Hoffman, called her into his corner office. Derek was the kind of middle manager who wore expensive suits but had no real understanding of the technical work happening beneath him. He sat behind his mahogany desk, fingers drumming impatiently as Rachel settled into the uncomfortable chair. Across from him, "We need to talk about the Morrison project," Derek said, not bothering with pleasantries. "The client wants the new trading platform live by Friday, and we're behind schedule." Rachel had seen this coming. The Morrison project was Pinnacle's biggest contract of the year, a complete overhaul of their legacy trading systems for a major investment firm. The timeline had been unrealistic from the start, compressed by sales promises that ignored technical realities. She had already put in 60-hour weeks for the past month, debugging code, optimizing databases, and handling integration issues that should have been caught in the planning phase. "Derek, I've been working on this nonstop," Rachel replied, keeping her voice steady. "The core functionality is solid, but rushing the final implementation could introduce security vulnerabilities. We're talking about handling millions of dollars in transactions." Derek's expression didn't change. "The client doesn't care about your concerns. They care about the deadline. I need you here this weekend, and probably next weekend too. We'll make it work." This was where things got complicated. Rachel had always been willing to put in extra hours when truly necessary, but this felt different. The company had been increasingly demanding unpaid overtime while simultaneously posting record profits. She had watched colleagues burn out and leave, their positions filled by cheaper, less experienced workers who couldn't handle the complex systems Rachel maintained. "I'll do what I can during regular hours," Rachel said carefully. "But I won't be working weekends without overtime compensation." According to company policy, database administrators are eligible for overtime pay after 40 hours. Derek's face darkened. "Policy is one thing, Rachel. Being a team player is another. Everyone else is pulling their weight. Everyone else isn't. Managing critical infrastructure that could crash the entire trading floor if something goes wrong," Rachel shot back. "I've saved this company from 3 major outages this quarter alone. My work directly contributed to the Hartwell acquisition closing early, which brought in $12 million in fees. I think fair compensation for weekend work isn't unreasonable." The conversation devolved from there. Derek made vague threats about attitude problems and not being committed to the team. Rachel stood her ground, citing labor laws and company policies that clearly supported her position. By the time she left his office, the battle lines were drawn. What Rachel didn't know was that Derek had already made up his mind. He saw her refusal as insubordination, a challenge to his authority that couldn't be tolerated. More importantly, he had been looking for ways to cut costs in his department, and Rachel's salary was the largest line item on his budget. An idea began forming in his mind, one that would solve multiple problems at once. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the office grew tense. Derek began assigning Rachel's routine tasks to other team members, claiming it was to distribute workload more efficiently. He started scheduling important meetings during times when Rachel was occupied, with critical maintenance, then complained about her absence. Small slights accumulated. Her access to certain development environments was temporarily misconfigured, her requests for new hardware were delayed indefinitely, and her suggestions during team meetings were dismissed without consideration. Rachel tried to focus on her work, but the writing was on the wall. She had seen this pattern before with other employees who had crossed Derek. The company's HR department was notoriously protective of management, and filing a complaint would likely accelerate whatever retaliation was coming. The axe fell on a Friday afternoon, just as Rachel was preparing to leave for the weekend. Derek appeared at her cubicle with 2 security guards and Janet Walsh from HR. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows as Janet delivered the rehearsed termination speech about restructuring and changing departmental needs. "We'll need your access cards, laptop, and any company property," Janet said, her voice professionally neutral. "Security will escort you to collect your personal items." Rachel felt a cold fury building in her chest, but she kept her expression calm. "I assume you have a transition plan for the Morrison project and the quarterly maintenance window next week?" Derek stepped forward, unable to hide his satisfaction. "We'll manage just fine. The team is more capable than you gave them credit for." This was Derek's crucial mistake. In his eagerness to assert dominance, he had failed to grasp the full scope of Rachel's responsibilities. She wasn't just another database administrator. She was the architect of Pinnacle's entire data infrastructure. Every custom script, every automated process, every security protocol bore her fingerprints. The systems she had built were elegant and efficient, but they were also complex enough that their inner workings were largely opaque to her colleagues. As the security guards watched, Rachel methodically packed her personal belongings into a cardboard box. Her coffee mug with the faded "World's Best Programmer" text, the small succulent plant her sister had given her, a few technical manuals she had purchased with her own money. But what she didn't pack were the dozen notebooks filled with system, documentation, password references, and architectural diagrams. Those, technically, belonged to the company. Walking through the lobby for the last time, Rachel's mind was already racing. She thought about the inadequate backup procedures she had repeatedly warned about, the undocumented legacy processes that only she fully understood, the custom monitoring scripts that would fail silently if not properly maintained. Derek thought he was cutting dead weight, but he had actually just removed the Keystone holding, up the entire technical infrastructure. The real irony was that Rachel had been planning to document everything properly. She had proposed a knowledge transfer program months ago, wanting to train junior staff and create redundancy in critical systems. Derek had rejected the proposal as an unnecessary expense, insisting that the current setup was working fine. Now, sitting in her car in the parking garage, Rachel realized that Derek was about to learn the difference between working fine and working fine because Rachel Martinez makes it work. The Morrison project wasn't just behind schedule. It was built on a foundation that was about to crumble, and when it did, the ripple effects would extend far beyond a single missed deadline. She started her engine and drove home, already formulating a plan that would ensure Derek never underestimated the value of treating technical staff with respect. The next few weeks were going to be very educational for everyone at Pinnacle Financial Services. Sarah Martinez had always been the quiet one in the corner cubicle at Dataflow Solutions, fingers dancing across her keyboard while her colleagues gossiped by the coffee machine. What they didn't know was that those same fingers could bring down an entire corporation's digital infrastructure in less than 10 minutes. And on a cold Tuesday morning in March, that's exactly what she did. But this story isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when loyalty meets betrayal, when skill meets desperation, and when a single line of code becomes the difference between justice and destruction. Sarah had been working at Dataflow Solutions for 3 years when Marcus Chen walked into her life. Not romantically. Sarah had sworn off office relationships after the disaster with her previous job, but professionally. Marcus was the new systems administrator, hired to modernize their aging IT infrastructure, and from day one, it was clear he was different from the usual corporate drones that populated their Denver headquarters. While most employees treated the IT department like glorified tech support, Marcus actually listened when Sarah mentioned the inefficiencies in their database management system. He didn't dismiss her suggestions or redirect her to submit a formal request through proper channels. Instead, he pulled up a chair next to her desk and asked her to show him exactly what she meant. "You see this query here?" Sarah pointed to her screen, where lines of SQL code scrolled past. "It's taking 47 seconds to pull customer data that should load in under 5. The indexing is completely backward." Marcus leaned in, studying the code with genuine interest. "You're right. How long have you been dealing with this?" 2 years, maybe longer. I've submitted reports, but management says the system works fine." "Define fine," Marcus said with a slight smile. Sarah pulled up her productivity metrics. "I'm completing about 60% of my assigned tasks because I spend most of my day waiting for database queries to resolve. Everyone in data analysis is dealing with the same problem, but we're told it's a hardware limitation." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Mind if I take a look at the back end?" That conversation sparked what would become the most productive professional relationship of Sarah's career. Marcus didn't just have administrative access. He had vision. He could see the potential in Dataflow's systems, buried under years of poor management decisions and Band-Aid solutions. More importantly, he saw the potential in Sarah. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Within 2 weeks, Marcus had identified dozens of optimization opportunities. The database restructuring alone could improve query speeds by over 300%. But Dataflow wasn't interested in spending money on infrastructure improvements, especially not ones suggested by their newest employee. "They hired me to maintain the current system, not rebuild it," Marcus explained to Sarah during one of their increasingly frequent lunch conversations. "But maintaining a broken system is like putting fresh paint on a sinking ship." Sarah understood the frustration. She'd been watching Dataflow's technical debt accumulate for years, knowing that every day they delayed proper fixes made the eventual overhaul more expensive and complicated. The company was hemorrhaging money on inefficient processes, but the executive team seemed more interested in quarterly profit margins than long-term stability. That's when Marcus made his proposal. "What if we did it anyway?" he asked one Friday afternoon, after another week of rejected improvement requests. "Not officially, just fix what we can fix." Sarah looked around the nearly empty office. Most of their colleagues had left early, for the weekend, but she and Marcus were still there, still working, still caring about a company that seemed determined to ignore their expertise. "You mean like unauthorized system modifications?" "I mean like doing our jobs properly, even if management doesn't understand what that means." It started small. Marcus would implement minor optimizations during off hours, changes so subtle that the performance improvements looked like natural fluctuations. Sarah would test new database configurations on isolated servers, documenting the results without officially submitting them anywhere. They weren't breaking any rules exactly, but they weren't following proper protocols either. The results were undeniable. Response times improved, system crashes decreased. Other departments began commenting on how much faster their applications were running, though they couldn't identify why. Sarah found herself completing her daily tasks with time to spare, finally, able to focus on the analytical work she'd been hired to do instead of wrestling with technical limitations. For 3 months, it worked perfectly. Marcus handled the infrastructure improvements while Sarah optimized the data workflows. They communicated through encrypted messages, sharing code snippets and system diagnostics like a secret language only they understood. It felt like they were part of something important, like they were actually making a difference. But corporate bureaucracy has a way of noticing when things start working too well. The first sign of trouble came during Sarah's quarterly performance review. Her supervisor, Janet Williams, seemed almost suspicious of her improved productivity metrics. "Your task completion rate has increased by 47% this quarter," Janet said, reading from her tablet. "That's unusual. I've been finding more efficient ways to run my analyses," Sarah replied carefully. "Efficient how?" Sarah had prepared for this question, but sitting across from Janet's skeptical expression, the rehearsed explanations felt flimsy. "Better query optimization, improved data organization, standard database management techniques." Janet made a note. "And you learned these techniques where?" "Online training, industry resources, professional development." It wasn't entirely a lie. Sarah had been continuously educating herself for years, long before Marcus arrived. But the specific optimizations she'd been implementing were based on his infrastructure improvements that officially didn't exist. "I see. Well, keep up the good work. Just make sure you're following all established protocols." The warning was subtle but clear. Janet suspected something, even if she couldn't prove it. Sarah immediately messaged Marcus through their encrypted channel. "We need to talk." They met that evening at a coffee shop downtown, far from the office and any potential surveillance. The conversation was tense from the start. "They're watching me," Sarah said without preamble. "Janet knows something's different." Marcus stirred his coffee thoughtfully. "Different how?" "Better performance should be celebrated, not investigated. Not if they can't explain it. Not if it makes them look incompetent for tolerating poor performance for so long." "So what do you want to do? Roll back the improvements? Go back to the broken system?" Sarah stared out the window at the downtown traffic. She'd spent 3 years watching data flow waste money and opportunities, accepting that corporate inertia was just the price of steady employment. These past 3 months had shown her what the company could be with proper technical leadership. Going backward felt like betrayal. "No," she said finally, "but we need to be more careful." Marcus nodded, but Sarah could see the frustration in his expression. He'd been hired to solve problems, and every time he tried to solve them properly, he encountered resistance from the very people who would benefit most from his expertise. "There's something else," he added. "I've been looking at the budget allocations for next quarter. They're cutting IT funding by 30%. Sarah's stomach dropped. 30%? But the system improvements won't matter if I don't have resources to maintain them. They're treating IT like an expense instead of an investment. Again, the coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. Sarah could see their careful work unraveling, all the progress they'd made dissolving back into the same inefficient mess they'd inherited. Worse, if budget cuts forced Marcus to leave, Sarah would be alone again, watching the systems deteriorate with no one who understood the technical implications. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Budget meeting is next Tuesday. If they approve the cuts, I'll probably get notice by the end of the week." Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. Not just disappointment, but something sharper. Marcus had proven himself valuable over and over again, had improved their systems beyond anything management had thought possible, and Dataflow was ready to discard him over budget line items they didn't understand. "There has to be something we can do," she said. Marcus shook his head. "I've tried everything official, documented improvements, cost-benefit analyses, performance metrics. They see IT as overhead, not infrastructure. Nothing I say will change that. Then maybe we need to show them what happens when their overhead disappears." The words came out before Sarah fully realized what she was suggesting. Marcus looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" Sarah wasn't entirely sure herself, but sitting in that coffee shop, watching Marcus's resignation settle over him like a heavy coat, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the desire to fight back. "I mean, maybe it's time they understood exactly how much their overhead is worth." The budget meeting lasted exactly 43 minutes. Sarah knew because she watched the conference room clock through the glass partition while pretending to work on quarterly reports. She could see the executives gesturing at printed charts, their faces displaying the kind of confident ignorance that had defined Dataflow's technical decisions for years. Marcus emerged looking like he'd been physically struck. He walked past Sarah's desk without making eye contact, headed straight for his office, and closed the door. The click of the lock echoed through the IT section like a gunshot. Sarah waited 30 minutes before approaching. She knocked softly, heard Marcus clear his throat, then tell her to come in. He was sitting behind his desk, staring at his computer screen, but she could tell he wasn't actually reading anything. "They approved the cuts," he said without looking up. "Effective immediately. I have until Friday to document all current projects and transition responsibilities." Friday? That's 3 days. They're very generous with their transition periods. Sarah closed the door behind her and sat down across from his desk. "What about the infrastructure projects, the database optimizations?" Marcus finally looked at her, and she saw something she'd never seen in his expression before. Defeat. Officially, those projects never existed. Unofficially, they'll probably start failing within a month after I leave. Maybe sooner if nobody maintains the custom scripts. Can't you document everything? Leave instructions? For who? They're not hiring a replacement. Janet's going to oversee IT operations directly, with support from an external consulting firm. Marcus pulled up an email on his screen. Phoenix Digital Solutions. They specialize in cost-effective technology management for mid-sized businesses. Sarah recognized the name. Phoenix Digital was known for maintaining systems at absolute minimum functionality while charging premium rates for basic services. They were the kind of company that would rather patch problems indefinitely than invest in proper solutions. "This is insane," she said. "Your improvements saved the company thousands of hours in productivity this quarter alone." Productivity improvements are hard to quantify on a balance sheet. Consulting fees are very easy to quantify. Sarah felt the cold sensation in her chest expanding, spreading through her arms and legs like ice water. "So they're going to pay Phoenix more money to do worse work. That's corporate logic for you." Marcus started typing something, then stopped and deleted it. Sarah realized he was trying to draft his transition documentation, probably struggling with how to explain technical improvements that weren't supposed to exist. "What if they don't have to choose?" she asked suddenly. "What do you mean?" Sarah wasn't entirely sure what she meant. The idea was still forming, dangerous and half-shaped, but it felt important. What if Phoenix Digital couldn't handle the transition? What if the consulting arrangement fell through? Marcus studied her face carefully. "Sarah, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking that maybe Dataflow needs to understand exactly what they're losing before they lose it. That sounds like sabotage. It sounds like education." Marcus leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since the budget meeting, Sarah saw a flicker of interest in his expression. "Hypothetically, what kind of education are we talking about?" Sarah pulled her chair closer to his desk and lowered her voice. "You've been maintaining this system for 8 months. You know every vulnerability, every dependency, every single point of failure. What happens if someone with malicious intent gains access to administrative privileges? The system would be completely compromised. Database integrity, user authentication, financial records, customer data, everything. And how long would it take Phoenix Digital to identify and fix that kind of comprehensive breach?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, working through the technical implications. Weeks, maybe months. They'd probably recommend rebuilding from scratch, which would cost 10 times more than proper maintenance. So if someone wanted to demonstrate the value of competent IT leadership, they could create a situation that makes that value impossible to ignore. Sarah felt her pulse quickening. The plan was taking shape, dangerous but elegant. Hypothetically, Marcus agreed. They spent the next hour discussing technical details in careful, hypothetical terms. Marcus explained the system, architecture, the points where security could be compromised, the cascading failures that would result from specific types of attacks. Sarah listened intently, her analytical mind already organizing the information into actionable steps. "The beauty of it," Marcus said, "is that the damage would look like an external attack. Phoenix Digital would find evidence of unauthorized access, system tampering, data corruption, all the hallmarks of professional cybercrime. But it would be reversible? With the right administrative access and proper technical knowledge, yes. But Phoenix won't have either. They'll spend weeks trying to understand what happened, then months trying to fix it." Sarah imagined Dataflow's executives frantically calling Phoenix Digital, demanding explanations and solutions while their entire business ground to a halt. Customer data inaccessible, financial systems offline, months of productivity improvements vanishing overnight. "And Dataflow would have to bring you back," she said, "at emergency consulting rates, with full authority to implement proper security measures." It was a perfect plan, elegant in its simplicity. Marcus would appear to be the victim of budget cuts, completely innocent of any wrongdoing. Sarah would continue working normally, expressing appropriate concern about the security breach, and Phoenix Digital would be exposed as incompetent, unable to handle the complex systems they'd promised to maintain. But as Sarah walked back to her desk, the plan's implications began to sink in. She wasn't just talking about embarrassing management or proving a point. She was talking about deliberately sabotaging her employer's computer systems, potentially destroying years of data and bringing business operations to a complete standstill. The legal consequences alone could be devastating. Corporate sabotage was a federal crime, punishable by years in prison and massive fines. Even if they never got caught, Sarah would be living with the knowledge that she'd committed a serious felony, that she'd betrayed the trust of colleagues who had nothing to do with the budget decisions. But then she thought about Marcus, packing up his office after 8 months of dedicated service. She thought about the months of improvements that would be lost, the inefficiencies that would return, the opportunities that would be wasted. She thought about Janet's suspicious questions and the implicit threat to follow established protocols, regardless of whether those protocols actually worked. Dataflow had made its choice. The company had decided that proper IT management wasn't worth the investment, that competent technical leadership was expendable, that short-term cost savings mattered more than long-term stability. They were willing to sacrifice functionality for the appearance of fiscal responsibility. Maybe it was time for them to experience the real cost of that decision. Sarah spent the rest of the day researching cybersecurity incidents, reading case studies of corporate data breaches and system failures. She learned about attack vectors and vulnerability assessments, about the difference between malicious hacking and penetration testing. Most importantly, she learned about plausible deniability. If done correctly, the attack would look completely external. A sophisticated cybercriminal organization, targeting Dataflow's customer database for financial gain. The kind of attack that happened to dozens of companies every year, the kind that exposed poor security practices and inadequate IT management. Phoenix Digital would be hired to investigate and repair the damage. They would find evidence of system infiltration, data corruption, and security vulnerabilities. But they wouldn't find evidence pointing to Marcus or Sarah because there wouldn't be any. The attack would appear to originate from outside the company, from criminal hackers with no connection to Dataflow's internal operations. By Thursday afternoon, Sarah had made her decision. She found Marcus in his office, boxing up his personal belongings, and closed the door behind her. "I want to do it," she said without preamble. Marcus looked up from the cardboard box he was filling. "Do what?" "The hypothetical situation we discussed. I want to make it real." Marcus set down the picture frame he'd been wrapping and studied her face. "Sarah, this isn't a game. If we get caught..." "We won't get caught. You'll be gone by Friday, completely innocent. I'll just be another employee, affected by the security breach. And Phoenix Digital will be too busy trying to understand what happened to look for internal involvement. But if something goes wrong, something is already wrong. They're firing the best IT manager this company has ever had and replacing him with consultants who don't understand our systems. That's not just wrong. It's stupid and wasteful and ultimately self-destructive. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering her argument. Finally, he asked, "When?" "Monday morning. After you're officially gone, after Phoenix takes over IT operations. We give them exactly 1 business day to demonstrate their competence. Then, we show them what real system failure looks like. And you're sure about this?" Sarah thought about the past 3 years, watching Dataflow's technical infrastructure stagnant while management focused on quarterly profits. She thought about the improvements that would be lost, the productivity gains that would evaporate, the missed opportunities for genuine innovation. "I'm sure," she said. Marcus nodded slowly, then pulled out a piece of paper and began writing. "Then we need to talk about technical details. And Sarah? After this conversation, we never discuss this topic again. Not until it's over." Sarah watched him write, her pulse steady despite the magnitude of what they were planning. For the first time in months, she felt like she was taking control of her professional destiny, instead of simply accepting whatever decisions were made for her. Dataflow wanted to treat IT as overhead. On Monday, they would learn exactly how expensive that overhead could become. Monday morning arrived with the kind of corporate normalcy that made Sarah's planned actions feel surreal. Employees shuffled to their desks with coffee cups and weekend stories, completely unaware that their company's digital infrastructure was about to experience what cybersecurity experts would later classify as a catastrophic multi-vector attack. Phoenix Digital had wasted no time asserting their presence. By 8 a.m., 2 consultants were already stationed in Marcus's former office, their matching polo shirts and confident demeanor broadcasting the kind of professional competence that looked impressive in PowerPoint presentations but crumbled under technical scrutiny. Sarah recognized the type immediately. Kevin Bradshaw, the senior consultant, had the smooth presentation skills of someone who'd learned technology management from business school case studies rather than actual system administration. His partner, Lisa Wong, seemed more technically competent but deferred to Kevin's authority on every decision, suggesting a corporate hierarchy that prioritized salesmanship over expertise. "Good morning, everyone," Kevin announced to the IT section at 9:15 a.m. "I know transitions can be challenging, but we're here to ensure continuity and improved efficiency. Phoenix Digital has managed similar transitions for over 40 companies in the past 2 years. Sarah smiled politely while mentally noting that 40 companies in 2 years suggested either rapid business growth or high client turnover. Given Phoenix's reputation, she suspected the latter. "We'll be conducting system assessments this week," Lisa added, "identifying optimization opportunities and security vulnerabilities. Our goal is seamless integration with minimal disruption to daily operations." The irony was almost painful. Sarah had spent months working with Marcus to optimize these exact systems, achieving performance improvements that Phoenix would probably take credit for discovering. Meanwhile, they were about to experience disruption that would make minimal seem like a distant fantasy. At 10:30 a.m., Sarah received an encrypted message on her personal phone. "Package delivered. Instructions confirmed. Good luck." Marcus had successfully uploaded the custom scripts to a secure server, accessible only through specific credentials that would automatically delete themselves after use. The technical execution was elegant. Multiple entry points, cascading failures, and forensic evidence that would point definitively toward external attackers. Sarah deleted the message and focused on her legitimate work, completing database queries and preparing analytical reports with the same methodical attention she'd always demonstrated. The contrast between her calm exterior and racing pulse would have been comical if the stakes weren't so serious. By lunchtime, Kevin and Lisa had begun their system assessment, methodically reviewing server configurations and network security protocols. Sarah watched from her desk as they discussed firewall settings and user access controls, their conversation peppered with technical terminology that sounded impressive but revealed fundamental misunderstandings about Dataflow's specific infrastructure. "The authentication system seems unnecessarily complex," she heard Kevin tell Lisa. "We should recommend simplification. Single sign-on across all platforms." Sarah bit back a laugh. Marcus had specifically designed the authentication complexity to prevent exactly the kind of security breach she was about to execute. Single sign-on would make the entire system more vulnerable, not less. But Phoenix Digital seemed determined to impose their standardized solutions regardless of contextual requirements. At 2:45 p.m., Sarah made her first move. She accessed the personnel database through her legitimate credentials, ostensibly to update employee contact information. The query was routine, the kind of task she performed several times per week, but this time she embedded a small script that would activate after a 12-hour delay. The script was virtually undetectable, designed to look like a routine maintenance function while actually creating backdoor access for more sophisticated attacks. The technical elegance of Marcus's design impressed her even as she implemented it. Each component appeared benign in isolation, but together they formed a comprehensive breach protocol that would systematically compromise every major system component. Database integrity, user authentication, financial records, customer data, backup systems, everything would fail in sequence, creating the appearance of a coordinated external attack. At 4:15 p.m., Phoenix Digital made their first major mistake. "We're going to update the firewall configuration," Kevin announced to the office. "Standard security enhancement. Should only take a few minutes." Sarah watched in fascination as Kevin and Lisa began modifying network security settings, apparently unaware that their standard configurations were incompatible with Dataflow's custom applications. Within 20 minutes, half the company's database connections had become unstable, forcing several departments to switch to manual processes. "Temporary connectivity issues," Lisa assured the increasingly frustrated employees. "The new configuration needs time to propagate through the system." Sarah helped troubleshoot the connectivity problems, offering suggestions that seemed helpful, while actually ensuring the instability would persist. It was almost too easy. Phoenix Digital's overconfidence had created the perfect cover for more serious system compromises. By 5:30 p.m., most employees had left for the day, frustrated by the afternoon's technical difficulties, but assuming the problems would be resolved overnight. Sarah remained at her desk, ostensibly catching up on work delayed by the connectivity issues, but actually preparing for the evening's real activities. At 6:45 p.m., the office was nearly empty. Kevin and Lisa had departed after assuring Janet Williams that the firewall issues would be completely resolved by morning. The cleaning crew wouldn't arrive until 8 p.m., giving Sarah a crucial window of uninterrupted access. She began with the customer database, uploading a sophisticated corruption script that would activate gradually over the next several hours. The corruption would appear random at first, but would eventually reveal patterns suggesting systematic data theft. Financial records would follow a similar progression, with transaction logs becoming increasingly unreliable until the entire accounting system required emergency shutdown. The user authentication system presented more complex challenges, but Marcus's preparation had been thorough. Sarah implemented a credential harvesting protocol that would capture login attempts while simultaneously corrupting the authentication database. Users would find themselves locked out of systems, unable to verify their identities, while administrators discovered that backup authentication methods had been mysteriously compromised. By 8:20 p.m., Sarah had activated 7 different attack vectors, each designed to trigger at specific intervals throughout the night. The progression would begin with minor inconveniences around 11 p.m., escalate to serious disruptions by 3 a.m., and reach complete system failure by 6 a.m. precisely, when Phoenix Digital would arrive to begin their second day of seamless integration. The cleaning crew arrived as Sarah was finishing her final preparations. She greeted them normally, exchanged brief pleasantries about the weekend weather, and left the building at 8:35 p.m. with the satisfied expression of someone who'd completed a productive day's work. At home, Sarah prepared dinner and watched television, maintaining her normal evening routine while mentally tracking the timeline of system failures occurring at Dataflow. The scripts were executing automatically now, beyond her control, creating digital chaos that would soon transform her quiet workplace into a crisis management center. Around 11:15 p.m., her personal phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Marcus. Phase 1 confirmed. External traces established. Countdown initiated. Sarah deleted the message and went to bed, setting her alarm for 6:30 a.m. Tomorrow would bring emergency meetings, frantic phone calls, and the discovery that Phoenix Digital's expertise was insufficient to handle sophisticated cybersecurity threats. Dataflow's executives would learn exactly what competent IT management was worth, measured in lost productivity, damaged reputation, and emergency consulting fees. But tonight, Sarah slept peacefully, dreaming of system architectures and cascading failures. While 23 miles away, Dataflow's servers began their carefully orchestrated descent into digital chaos. The first authentication failures triggered at 11:47 p.m., followed by database corruption alerts at 12:23 a.m. By 2:15 a.m., the backup systems were reporting critical errors. At 4:36 a.m., the financial database went completely offline. Phoenix Digital would arrive at 8 a.m. to find a company in digital ruins, with forensic evidence pointing definitively toward external cybercriminals and absolutely no indication of internal sabotage. The education of Dataflow's management was about to begin. Sarah arrived at the office Tuesday morning to find absolute pandemonium. The parking lot was fuller than usual, with employees clustering around the building entrance, some talking urgently on their phones while others simply looked confused. Through the glass doors, she could see people gathered in small groups, their expressions ranging from frustration to panic. The elevator ride to the third floor felt longer than usual, filled with hushed conversations about system problems and security issues. Sarah maintained her puzzled expression, asking the same questions her colleagues were asking. What's happening? Are we under attack? When will everything be back online? The IT section looked like a war zone. Kevin Bradshaw stood in the center of the chaos, his confident demeanor from yesterday completely gone, replaced by barely controlled panic. His Phoenix Digital polo shirt was wrinkled, suggesting he'd been called in during the early morning hours. Lisa Wong sat at Marcus's former desk, frantically typing while surrounded by printouts and empty coffee cups. Sarah, thank God you're key. Here, Janet Williams called out as soon as she spotted her. We need all hands on deck. The entire system went down around 4 this morning. Down how? Sarah asked, projecting the right mix of concern and professional curiosity. Everything. Customer database, financial records, email servers, even the phone system. Kevin says we've been hit by some kind of sophisticated cyber attack. Sarah turned to Kevin, who was ending a heated phone conversation with what sounded like his supervisor. His face was flushed, and small beads of sweat had formed on his forehead despite the office air conditioning. The attack appears to have been coordinated, Kevin announced to the growing crowd of employees. Multiple entry points, cascading system failures, data corruption across all major platforms. This is the work of professional cybercriminals. What kind of data was compromised? Asked Tom Harrison from the accounting department. We're still assessing the damage, Lisa replied, not looking up from her screen. Customer records, financial transactions, employee information, potentially everything stored on our servers. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction watching Phoenix Digital struggle with the crisis they were completely unprepared to handle. Every technical decision they'd made yesterday had worsened the situation, creating additional vulnerabilities that her scripts had exploited perfectly. "How long until everything's back online?" Janet asked. Kevin and Lisa exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their uncertainty. "The damage is extensive," Kevin said carefully. "We're talking about complete system restoration, possibly rebuilding from backup servers. This could take weeks." "Weeks?" Janet's voice rose an octave. "We have customer commitments, payroll to process, quarterly reports due next Monday. We can't be offline for weeks." "I understand the urgency," Kevin replied, "but we need to ensure complete security before bringing any systems back online. If we rush the restoration process, we risk additional breaches." Sarah watched this exchange with growing amazement. Phoenix Digital was trapped in a classic catch-22. They couldn't restore the systems quickly because they didn't understand the attack. But they couldn't understand the attack because they lacked the technical expertise to analyze the sophisticated infiltration methods Marcus had designed. Around 10:30 a.m., the first external consequences began manifesting. Customer service started receiving calls from clients who couldn't access their account information. The accounting department discovered they couldn't process vendor payments. Sales representatives found themselves unable to retrieve customer purchase histories or generate new quotes. "We need to contact our insurance company," Janet announced. "Cyber liability coverage should help with recovery costs." "Already done," Kevin said. "They're sending a forensic team this afternoon. But insurance won't cover business interruption losses if we can't demonstrate proper security protocols were in place." Sarah almost laughed at the irony. Dataflow's proper security protocols had been designed and implemented by Marcus, the same person whose budget had been cut to save money. Phoenix Digital was about to discover that their standard security measures were inadequate for protecting against sophisticated attacks. By noon, the crisis had attracted attention from Dataflow's executive team. CEO Robert Mitchell arrived with two other executives Sarah didn't recognize, their expensive suits and grim expressions conveying the seriousness of the situation. "Status report?" Mitchell demanded without preamble. Kevin cleared his throat nervously. "We've identified evidence of a multi-vector cyber attack, targeting our customer database and financial systems. The attackers used advanced techniques to bypass our security measures and corrupt critical data." "What kind of techniques?" "SQL injection, privilege escalation, database manipulation, sophisticated methods consistent with organized cybercrime. The attack was designed to cause maximum damage while covering the perpetrator's tracks." Sarah marveled at Kevin's technical vocabulary, which sounded impressive but revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of what had actually happened. He was describing the symptoms without comprehending the underlying cause, like a doctor treating fever without diagnosing infection. "How long have these vulnerabilities existed?" Mitchell asked. "That's difficult to determine," Lisa interjected. "The previous IT administrator may have left security gaps that weren't immediately apparent." Sarah felt a flash of anger at this attempt to blame Marcus for Phoenix Digital's incompetence, but she forced herself to remain silent. Defending Marcus would only draw suspicion to herself. "What's our recovery timeline?" Mitchell continued. "Conservative estimate is 3 to 4 weeks for complete system restoration," Kevin replied. "We need to rebuild the database infrastructure, restore from clean backups, and implement enhanced security measures to prevent future attacks." 3 to 4 weeks? Mitchell's voice carried the tone of someone calculating lost revenue. "What about emergency measures? Temporary solutions?" "Anything temporary would be vulnerable to additional attacks. We need comprehensive security before bringing systems back online." Sarah realized that Phoenix Digital had painted themselves into a corner. Their lack of understanding about Dataflow's specific systems meant they couldn't implement quick fixes, but their reputation depended on appearing competent and thorough. They were trapped between incompetence and professional obligation. Around 2 p.m., the forensic team arrived. 3 specialists from a major cybersecurity firm, armed with sophisticated diagnostic equipment and grim expressions. Sarah watched them begin their investigation, methodically examining server logs and network traffic patterns, looking for the digital fingerprints that Marcus had so carefully planted. Initial assessment confirms external infiltration, the lead forensic investigator announced after 2 hours of analysis. The attack signatures are consistent with advanced persistent threat actors, possibly state-sponsored or organized crime. Sarah suppressed a smile. Marcus's false flag operation was working perfectly, creating forensic evidence that pointed definitively away from internal involvement while establishing the attack's sophisticated nature. We've identified at least 7 different entry points, the investigator continued, suggesting coordinated reconnaissance over several weeks or months. The attackers demonstrated intimate knowledge of your system architecture and business processes. Kevin nodded sagely, as if this revelation confirmed his own suspicions rather than revealing information he'd never discovered independently. What's our liability exposure? Mitchell asked. Depends on regulatory requirements and customer notification obligations. If personal data was compromised, you'll need to notify affected individuals within 72 hours. Financial data breach could trigger SEC reporting requirements. Sarah watched Mitchell's face grow paler as the legal implications mounted. Dataflow wasn't just dealing with system restoration costs. They were facing potential lawsuits, regulatory fines, and reputation damage that could take years to repair. There is one option, the forensic investigator added thoughtfully. If you can locate the original system architect, someone with intimate knowledge of your infrastructure, they might be able to accelerate the recovery process. Sometimes the person who built the system is the best person to rebuild it. Mitchell turned to Janet. What happened to our previous IT manager? Marcus Chen. He was terminated Friday as part of budget reductions. Can we bring him back? Janet glanced nervously at Kevin, who was clearly uncomfortable with the suggestion. He's probably already committed to another position. Find him, Mitchell ordered. Offer whatever it takes. Emergency consulting rates, full restoration of his previous position, whatever he wants. We need someone who understands our systems. Sarah felt a surge of triumph. The plan was working exactly as intended. Dataflow was about to discover that competent IT management wasn't an expense. It was an investment that paid dividends during DAO. Crisis situations. Phoenix Digital had proven themselves incapable of handling sophisticated security threats, while Marcus's expertise had become suddenly indispensable. The budget cuts that had seemed financially prudent on Friday now looked like catastrophic miscalculations. As employees filed out at the end of the day, many unable to complete their basic work tasks, Sarah reflected on the elegant justice of the situation. Dataflow had chosen to treat IT as overhead rather than infrastructure. Now they were learning the true cost of that decision, measured in lost productivity, damaged reputation, and emergency consulting fees that would dwarf Marcus's original salary. Tomorrow would bring more chaos, more desperate attempts by Phoenix Digital to appear competent, and hopefully, Marcus's triumphant return as the company's savior. Wednesday morning brought news that spread through Dataflow's offices faster than DAO, the original cyber attack. Marcus Chen was returning. Sarah heard the whispers before she even reached her desk. Emergency consulting contract, unprecedented authority, unlimited budget for system restoration. The very executives who had dismissed his expertise 5 days earlier were now treating him like their corporate savior. Sarah arrived early to witness Marcus's entrance, curious to see how he would handle this carefully orchestrated reversal of fortune. At 8:15 a.m., he walked through the main entrance with the measured confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was walking into. Gone was the defeated expression from Friday afternoon, replaced by the focused intensity of a professional called in to solve an impossible problem. Janet Williams met him at the elevator, her demeanor a stark contrast to the dismissive attitude she'd displayed during his termination meeting. Marcus, Thank you for coming back. I know the circumstances of your departure were unfortunate. Let's focus on the current situation, Marcus replied diplomatically. I understand you've experienced a significant security breach. Catastrophic would be more accurate. Our entire digital infrastructure has been compromised. Phoenix Digital estimates 3 to 4 weeks for complete restoration. Marcus nodded thoughtfully as they walked toward the IT section. I'll need to conduct my own assessment before providing timeline estimates. Every system architecture is different. Sarah watched this exchange from her desk, marveling at Marcus's poker face. He was discussing the crisis he'd engineered with the same professional detachment he might bring to any legitimate consulting engagement. The performance was flawless. Kevin Bradshaw's reaction to Marcus's arrival was painfully obvious. His confident facade cracked the moment he saw his replacement, revealing the insecurity that came with knowing he was professionally outmatched. Lisa Wong seemed relieved, probably hoping that Marcus's expertise would compensate for their obvious inadequacies. I've prepared a comprehensive status report, Kevin said, offering Marcus a thick folder of printouts. Attack vectors, damage assessment, preliminary recovery recommendations. Marcus accepted the folder with polite interest, though Sarah knew he was already aware of every detail Kevin had laboriously documented. Thank you. I'll review this and begin my independent analysis immediately. The forensic team had established a makeshift command center in the conference room, their laptops and diagnostic equipment creating an atmosphere of high-tech urgency. Marcus introduced himself to the lead investigator, Dr. Amanda Foster, and began reviewing their preliminary findings. The attack shows sophisticated planning, Dr. Foster explained, pulling up network diagrams on her laptop screen. Multiple entry points, cascading failures, evidence of prolonged reconnaissance. We're dealing with advanced threat actors. What's your assessment of the internal security measures? Marcus asked. Inconsistent. Some areas show excellent security architecture, while others have glaring vulnerabilities. It's almost like 2 different security philosophies were implemented simultaneously. Sarah bit back a smile. Dr. Foster had unknowingly identified the exact situation. Marcus's robust security measures existing alongside Phoenix Digital's inadequate improvements. The contrast made Dataflow's systems appear schizophrenic, professionally secured in some areas while laughably vulnerable in others. The attackers exploited these inconsistencies perfectly, Dr. Foster continued. They used the secure areas to gain credibility while targeting the vulnerable points for actual infiltration. Marcus nodded gravely. Classic reconnaissance strategy. Map the entire system, identify the weakest links, then exploit those weaknesses to compromise stronger areas. By noon, Marcus had completed his independent assessment and requested a meeting with the executive team. Sarah positioned herself near the conference room, ostensibly organizing files while actually listening to the presentation that would determine Dataflow's immediate future. The damage is extensive but recoverable, Marcus announced to the assembled executives. However, Phoenix Digital's timeline estimate of 3 to 4 weeks is optimistic to the point of being unrealistic. CEO Mitchell leaned forward. What's your timeline? With proper resources and authority, I can have critical systems operational within 72 hours. Complete restoration with enhanced security measures will take approximately 2 weeks. The contrast with Phoenix Digital's estimate was stark. Kevin Bradshaw shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly unprepared for this level of confidence from someone who'd supposedly inherited the same compromised systems. How is that possible? Mitchell asked. I designed these systems originally. I understand their architecture, dependencies, and recovery procedures. More importantly, I can distinguish between genuine attack damage and collateral failures caused by improper response procedures. Sarah felt a surge of admiration for Marcus's diplomatic phrasing. He was essentially saying that Phoenix Digital had made the situation worse without directly insulting their competence. What do you need? Mitchell continued. complete administrative authority over all IT systems, unlimited budget for emergency hardware and software, and immediate termination of the Phoenix Digital contract. The room fell silent. Kevin's face turned an interesting shade of red while Lisa Wong stared at her hands. Phoenix Digital was being publicly dismissed after less than 3 days on the job. Done, Mitchell said without hesitation. Kevin, Lisa, thank you for your efforts. We'll handle contract termination through our legal department. The speed of Phoenix Digital's dismissal was almost anticlimactic. Kevin gathered his materials with wounded dignity, while Lisa mumbled something about unrealistic expectations and insufficient cooperation from existing staff. Within 30 minutes, they were gone, leaving behind a pile of useless documentation and a conference room full of executives who were beginning to understand the true cost of their budget decisions. Marcus immediately began issuing orders, with the authority of someone who no longer needed to seek approval for technical decisions. Sarah, I need you to assist with database recovery procedures. Your analytical skills will be crucial for validating data integrity after restoration. Sarah felt a thrill of excitement masked as professional concern. Of course. What do you need me to do? Help me identify which backup systems are clean and which might have been compromised. We need to establish a baseline for trusted data before beginning restoration procedures. For the next 6 hours, Sarah worked alongside Marcus in what appeared to be a desperate attempt to save Dataflow's digital infrastructure. In reality, they were carefully dismantling the sophisticated attack that Marcus had designed, removing each component in the precise reverse order of its implementation. The process was technically elegant and theatrically convincing. Marcus would discover corrupted files, analyze the attack vectors, and develop recovery procedures that appeared to be born from sudden inspiration, but were actually following predetermined scripts. Sarah provided analytical support, validating database integrity and confirming that restored systems were functioning properly. I'm seeing signs of recovery in the customer database, Sarah announced around 6 p.m., loud, enough for nearby colleagues to hear. Authentication systems are responding normally, and query response times are back to baseline levels. Excellent, Marcus replied. The financial systems should follow within the next few hours. We're making better progress than expected. By Thursday morning, Dataflow's critical systems were operational again. Employees arrived to find their computers working normally, emails flowing, and databases responding with the kind of speed and reliability they hadn't experienced since Marcus's original optimizations months earlier. The contrast with Tuesday's chaos was dramatic and obviously intentional. Dr. Foster's forensic team confirmed that the security threats had been neutralized and that enhanced protective measures were now in place. Their final report would identify the attack as the work of sophisticated external actors, with no evidence of internal involvement or ongoing vulnerabilities. Remarkable recovery, Dr. Foster told Marcus during her exit interview. I've never seen someone reverse this level of damage so quickly. Your understanding of these systems is exceptional. 3 years of design and optimization work pays dividends during crisis situations, Marcus replied modestly. CEO Mitchell called an all-hands meeting Thursday afternoon to address the crisis resolution and announce changes to Dataflow's IT management structure. Sarah joined the crowd of employees gathering in the main conference room, curious to hear the official narrative of recent events. As you all know, we experienced a serious cybersecurity incident this week, Mitchell began. Thanks to exceptional work by our emergency response team, all systems have been restored with enhanced security measures in place. He paused to let the relief settle over the crowd before continuing. This incident has highlighted the critical importance of robust IT infrastructure and expert technical leadership. Effective immediately, Marcus Chen is rejoining Dataflow as Chief Technology Officer, with full authority over all IT operations and infrastructure development. The applause was genuine and enthusiastic. Marcus had gone from terminated employee to executive leadership in less than a week, his value demonstrated through crisis management that bordered on miraculous. Sarah clapped along with her colleagues, privately celebrating the elegant success of their collaborative deception. Additionally, Mitchell continued, we're implementing immediate budget increases for IT infrastructure, cybersecurity measures, and technical staff development. Recent events have shown us that technology investments are not optional expenses, but essential business infrastructure. The irony was perfect. Dataflow's attempt to cut IT costs had resulted in emergency expenses that exceeded Marcus's annual salary by a factor of 10, not including the productivity losses, reputation damage, and legal exposure they'd narrowly avoided. The company had learned exactly what competent technical leadership was worth, measured in crisis response capabilities and system restoration expertise. As employees filed out of the meeting, Sarah felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond simple revenge. They had accomplished something more significant than embarrassing incompetent managers or proving a point about corporate priorities. They had demonstrated that technical expertise deserved respect, that infrastructure investments were essential for business stability, and that treating skilled professionals as disposable overhead was ultimately self-destructive. Marcus caught her eye as the crowd dispersed, offering a subtle nod that acknowledged their shared success. Tomorrow would bring normal work routines, system optimization projects, and the kind of collaborative technical development that had originally brought them together. But today belonged to the quiet satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly, justice delivered through elegant technical expertise, and a company that had learned to value what it had almost lost. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the newly renovated IT department, watching Marcus conduct a security briefing for Dataflow's board of directors. The transformation was remarkable. What had once been a neglected corner of the building was now a state-of-the-art technology center, complete with redundant servers, advanced monitoring systems, and a team of skilled professionals who actually understood the infrastructure they managed. Our cybersecurity posture has improved dramatically, Marcus explained to the assembled executives, gesturing toward wall-mounted displays showing real-time system performance metrics. 0 successful intrusion attempts in the past 4 months, 99.7% uptime across all critical systems, and query response times that exceed industry benchmarks. Sarah smiled as she recognized the irony. The very systems that Phoenix Digital had declared irreparably damaged were now performing better than ever, thanks to the infrastructure investments that Marcus's crisis management had finally justified. Dataflow's executives, once skeptical of IT spending, now approved every technical recommendation without question. The financial impact had been transformative as well. Sarah's new role as senior data analyst came with a 40% salary increase and genuine respect for her analytical expertise. The database optimizations she and Marcus had pioneered were saving the company hundreds of thousands of dollars annually in improved efficiency and reduced processing costs. The key lesson, Marcus continued his presentation, is that cybersecurity isn't just about preventing attacks. It's about building resilient systems that can detect, respond to, and recover from sophisticated threats. Our January incident taught us that reactive security measures are insufficient in today's threat environment. Sarah marveled at how their January incident had become a case study in crisis management, referenced in industry publications and cybersecurity conferences as an example of successful threat response. The forensic report had been so convincing that Dr. Foster's team had used it as a template for investigating similar attacks at other companies. More importantly, the incident had fundamentally changed Dataflow's corporate culture around technology. IT was no longer viewed as overhead, but as strategic infrastructure essential for business operations. Technical staff were consulted on major business decisions, their expertise valued and compensated appropriately. The vindication felt complete. When Sarah received an unexpected email that afternoon, Phoenix Digital was offering her a senior consulting position, apparently unaware of her connection to their Dataflow humiliation. The irony was too perfect. The company that had proven incompetent to handle her and Marcus's systems now wanted to hire her expertise for other clients. She declined politely, then shared the email with Marcus during their weekly optimization meeting. His laughter echoed through the server room, a sound of pure satisfaction that captured everything they'd accomplished together. "Any regrets?" he asked, reviewing the latest performance metrics on his tablet. Sarah considered the question seriously. They had committed what was technically corporate sabotage, risking criminal prosecution and professional destruction. But they had also exposed genuine incompetence, prevented long-term damage to company operations, and created positive changes that would benefit data flow for years to come. "None," she said finally. "Sometimes the system needs a shock to function properly." Marcus nodded, then pulled up a new project proposal on his screen. "Speaking of system shocks, I've been thinking about our disaster recovery procedures. What would happen if we faced a real external attack? Something we didn't plan and couldn't control?" Sarah realized he was right to be concerned. Their orchestrated crisis had revealed Dataflow's vulnerabilities, but it had also demonstrated that sophisticated attacks were entirely possible. If they could breach the system so completely, so could genuine cybercriminals with malicious intent. "We build better defenses," she said. "Real ones this time." "Exactly. And this time, we have the budget, authority, and executive support to do it right." As Sarah gathered her materials to leave, she reflected on the unexpected trajectory of her career. 6 months ago, she had been a frustrated data analyst watching inefficient systems waste her potential. Today, she was a respected technical professional working on cutting-edge infrastructure projects that would define Dataflow's competitive advantage for the next decade. The transformation hadn't come through official channels or corporate recognition programs. It had come through technical expertise, strategic thinking, and the courage to take calculated risks when conventional approaches failed. Sometimes justice required unconventional methods, and sometimes the greatest service to an organization was forcing it to confront its own mistakes. Sarah turned off her workstation and headed for the exit, passing the empty space where Phoenix Digital had briefly established their command center. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, legitimate technical problems that required innovative solutions. But tonight, she would go home with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had fundamentally changed her professional destiny through intelligence, skill, and perfectly executed revenge. The database was secure, the systems were optimized, and Dataflow had finally learned to value the expertise that had been there all along, waiting patiently in the corner cubicle for someone to recognize its worth. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.